Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Blacklist. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, the overarching blacklister in this episode is a doctor who's basically involved with a doping scam. Basically, a whole bunch of athletes are taking drugs to obviously increase their performance. The first one we get introduced to is a tennis player who has this reluctancy about it, but the doctor's like, no. He's like, no, this is going to be good. It's fine. I want to make sure you win, and ends up killing the dude. Now, Reddington believes that this is connected to like a family that has like ties in the criminal world of betting, that basically a lot of betting in the world and stuff like that, it kind of goes through them, so they've made a killing off of it. But obviously they took a hit after like the US kind of put like restrictions on like state gambling and stuff like that, sports gambling. So Maier, who's the doctor behind all the doping and stuff, like they'd always got tips from him about who's doping and all of that. So initially Reddington's thinking like, right, they must be removing the like anyone that's a top tier player and stuff like that. He's thinking like, right, they might be in this to do that. So he actually goes with Denbei, which that's a whole plot line within itself, but we'll get to that later. But he goes with Denbei to try and find out if they're connected to this, but like, no, they cut ties with Maier years ago, so anything Maier's doing right now, he's on his own. Well, not, because we end up finding out later on he's actually working with that Walker guy. I was very suspicious of the dude the moment it's just that weird thing in the investigation where, for one, he was popping up a little too much, being too helpful. I'm like, especially later on when he was like, oh, is Annie still living in Philadelphia? And you're like, all right. So, because I was figuring he was going to try and get some code to somebody to be like, yo, I need you to handle this. But for him to show up himself, that's what I was kind of surprised by. And then the moment he has the bag, I was like, oh, did you kill Maier? It's like, yep, you did. Like, after he killed Stella, the reporter, you popped him just because you're covering up all the loose ends, because he's the one that supplied not only Maier with the athletes to dope, he's the one that actually kind of gave him the go-ahead. So Maier's the last like cog in all of this, that if he gets caught in question, especially with the FBI investigating all of this, because Stella was the reporter who wouldn't let this go. She found a connection between all this. I guess she was just really good at her job. I don't think they ever explained how she stumbled across all of this, but she figured out a good chunk of it. Not necessarily everything, but the FBI, based with what she ended up coming up with, ended up figuring out most of it. So, and I love this case also led to some like complications between Park and Wrestler. Wrestler saying like, oh, he's much better after visiting Liz, see some light at the end of the tunnel, and she's like, yeah, I'm glad that you shaved the beard and everything, now it feels like you have less to hide. But then like the moment he's at that tennis player's like parents' house and going through their Metascam, I'm like, oh dude, that's kind of a low. But I was like, and then later on in Stella's place, he ends up taking the prescription pad. I did not know. I was surprised when Park caught him. I was like, oh man, he's just going to get away from it. And she's like, what was that? And he was like, what? I thought she was talking about something else, because we know Stella had slipped like the flash drive or whatever. I guess before she died, she'd already swallowed it by the time they got there, because I thought they'd find it in her hand. But it's like, right, don't want to take the chance of dying with it in your hand, because there's a good chance they might see it on you. So held on to that last bit of information, which ended up being the linchpin to unraveling this whole situation. But Park calling him out, being like, what was it? And don't even say what. And he's like, okay, fine, you caught me. She's like, really? Like, she was just upset with him. And I think it's interesting when Park kind of goes into like why this is so personal to her. She's talked about her mother's addiction and what that did to her. And so she wasn't able to help her mom, but by helping Wrestler, because Wrestler is someone she cares about, she's thinking like, right, if I could help you stay on the straight and narrow, if I could get you, make sure that you keep your job, because I know if you keep that, that's going to keep you focused on that, and not, she's hoping that she could help him, whereas she feels like she failed her mom before. But she's like, you know what, I'm done helping you, because she just feels like, I've already put myself in a position, helping you, putting me in a position where like my marriage is already rocky. I got hit by a weapon that can go through walls, had a miscarriage, like everything. And then on top of that, despite all that I'm going through, I decided to take your baggage onto and try and help you. But now it's like, no, I'm done. You want to do it, you do it on your own. And so they had like, obviously Aram, Denbei, and Cooper don't have the context of like, they're back and forth of like, kind of like, about secrets and stuff like that, of like, that things aren't kind of what you think they are, because we are missing facts in the case, because it seems like Maier might be behind everything, but it's like, what reason would he have to do that? So there's just a lot of pushback between the two of them in the conversation. Once again, to everyone else, to the audience, it's like, oh, we know the subtext for this conversation, whereas the team is just looking at it as like, oh, an argument between like colleagues about, not an argument, but disagreement about like what is really going on with the case. But yeah, I guess what should have also been a pretty clear sign was, if I remember correctly, the tennis player dude's name was Sam, right? It's like, yeah, Sam Rhodes. And I was like, him being like, yeah, I'm something like a brother. He was my first. I'm like, the way he was gushing and all that beginning, I'm like, that should have been a key sign of like, yeah, betrayal comes from so close, huh? But it's like, yeah, like he built an empire, and he wasn't about to have that all come crumbling down because this doping situation was found out. Because it turns out, like, it's not just one or two. It turns out there's like, 32 of his athletes were doping. So it would have like destroyed everything that he had built up. So he wasn't going to let that come falling apart. He's come too far. So I was almost impressed with how he slid that situation to be what it was. The way he handled the whole, like when Aram and Park showed up, and he was like, hey guys, I just got here. Oh my God. He's like, go. I was like, Aram, don't leave her. And he's like, just go get him. He's like, okay, thank you. And I'm like, oh, you slide back. So what were you going to do? Kill her and then leave? Like, they know you were the last, but I guess it's like, right, if he leaves, it'll give him enough. If he kills her, leaves, it'll give him, or he'll probably justify by being like, oh my God, I don't know what happened. She just, like, I'm sure he'd still play up the role of, like, victim and, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. I was just here, just something went wrong. I'm assuming that's what that was going to be, but luckily, Park came back in time to stop him. And then he tried to hit her with the bag and run. Aram was there and got him. And I love that little thing Aram says at the end. I thought was kind of interesting. He talks about like history existed. What was it? What was it before like writing or whatever? Well, because history, we know about it because it's writing. But in fact, sports actually outdates writing, because sports was around for like 7,000 years before writing was even a thing. And I was like, that's fascinating to kind of know that. And so he's basically saying that this is something that is kind of core to who we are. It isn't just a pastime. Like, it is something that is entangled with human history. And it's like, yeah, you polluted it and you tainted it. You and people doing what you do, like cheating what is supposed to be a fair game. And it's like, right, we have all the evidence because of Stella. Plus, we found Moore's body inside of your car, and we also found all the evidence he took. So we got you dead to rights. So and we plus found out about the athletes you're doping. So it's like, right, well, let's start at the beginning. So that was kind of an interesting development. Cooper, on the other hand, is dealing with things in his own right, where he like informs his cop buddy, like, right. It turns out he was drugged, and it's like, cool, let's let the cops know. It's like, we can't. Remember what you did? You basically switched out the bullet results, so we're kind of screwed in that department, especially because someone's blackmailing us. And he reached out and was like, well, who is it? Well, it turns out after doing some investigating, they find out where Cooper got drugged, and it was at a bar. And it's like, and David Cooper's like, well, why would that dude do that? Because it doesn't seem like Cooper has any connection to the guy. But by the time Cooper goes and finds the guy, he's already dead. And the person calls him up and is like, oh, now you've got 2 pieces of blood on your hand. It's like, I guess whoever this is kind of like, right, like, I'm getting payback of, like, whatever this is, them going after Cooper, framing Cooper, this is personal. For what reasons, I don't know. But to go so hard in the paint and even blame him, like, right, if you had just, like, going down the drain like you were supposed to, maybe this person has a history of Cooper that is like, right, if things had never played out to where we are right now, 2 innocent people wouldn't be dead. Their blood is on your hands. This is your fault. There's now an extra person that's dead because of you. Like, you had to keep digging. You want to try and prove your innocence. So, especially because his buddy and his wife are going to be drawn into this. They are a part of this because they helped cover up what he did. Yes, he didn't do anything, but it doesn't matter after the fact. So, that's definitely going to be interesting to find out, like, what the hell all of that's about. Circling back to the wrestler and Alina situation I thought was kind of interesting. Was Cooper, like, no wrestler came to her and was like, here, I'd put the prescription back, but I'd already torn off a prescription, and it's here. He's like, right, going to see Liz, it didn't fully, like, show me the light at the end of the tunnel like I made it out to be. It isn't like, it didn't fix anything. If in fact, it is just as hard. It didn't make anything easier, but he's like, I am trying, but it's still a bit of a struggle. And she's like, I get it. You need help. Like, I don't think I can help you. She's like, in fact, I'm just going to end up making it worse. So she's like, basically like, you need to talk to somebody, get some actual professional help. She takes the pills. And so he's just like, right, I am still figuring it out. I'm going through it. Just don't give up on me. And she's just kind of like reluctant, but like, yeah, she can't let him go. Like, she's trying to be there for him and support, which I thought was pretty dope. But I even look, because she was telling him like, oh, you can't just like handcuff yourself to your desk or whatever, which he immediately tries to do that at the end. He puts some pills, he takes the pills out of his pocket just to make sure they're out of his reach so he can't pop them. I'm assuming like he doesn't have the keys to the handcuff on him, so he's just telling Alina like, yeah, so come into work early. Whenever you get here, just make sure it's kind of early, and you don't ruin things. Like, you are helping me, and I am going to need your help to get through this. So, I do think that is a neat point, that it's like, right, it's not like an over and done. It's like, no, he's still dealing with addiction. It isn't something that goes away. Like, once you're in that position, you know, we already knew that because of his character, that he has already had these issues before, but now it's a situation of like, cool, like, I have, not cool, but like, in a sense that I am going to have to, it just, like, this whole Liz thing, like, hit him even harder, you know, so... And now, since he started spiraling, coming back up for air because of this whole situation that he's kind of drowning through, it's like, it's not going to be easy to kind of surmount this one. I mean, it's never going to be an easy. It's going to be struggle. Every day is going to be a struggle in itself. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out, especially like the him and Park, because I think that's going to be a neat thing of like bringing him and Park closer together. But other than that, a big part of this episode is Reddington struggling with the Dembe situation, because he's like, right, Dembe's the one that told Liz the truth, and because he told her the truth, she hesitated when the time came. She could have killed me and immediately gotten out of there, and she wouldn't be dead right now if it wasn't for Dembe. And he's struggling to deal with that. So, but he ends up taking the guy who killed Liz. He has his phone. He's like, I took it on instinct, and now it's like, right, he's trying to find out if there's, because currently it seems with his death, everything else is gone, it's all done, but he's like, I'm curious like whether or not there's still potential, anyone else with ties to this still out there. So he wants Tadashi to look into it, but Mercedes was like, don't do this. Like, if you open this Pandora's box, you're not going to be able to close it back up, because she wants to go back home, because it's like, right, once you go down this path, you're just going to become obsessed with it. Because for her, it's like, when we met, this was all said and done, and we were able to build kind of a life for ourselves. We were happy, and he was, but the problem is, at the time, he thought it was over with, but now he realizes, like, wait, there's a lot more. Like, coming back, because even at one point, Reddington did say, like, earlier on in the season, being like, maybe me coming back was a mistake. To be fair, it wasn't your choice. You kind of got dragged back unintentionally. Like, you didn't want to come back, but Cooper and them kind of convinced you to come back because of everything. So, because of Dembe and everything. So loyalty to an old friend, which I'm sure that also stings a little bit more, knowing like, right, he was the reason why Liz died, and now it's like he's also the reason why, a good chunk of the reason why you came back in the first place. So I'm sure that all kind of stings a little, but he ended up confronting Dembe of like, right, you told Liz the truth, and he was like, well, yeah, she was happy to know the truth. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. Like, it still wasn't your place to tell her the truth. We had a plan, and you went against it, you know? Because that's the complicated thing of like, because Dembe has said it time and time and time again over the course of this series. It's not like this was a recent development. He's always stated, he told Reddington time and time again, you need to tell Liz the truth, and he never did. And he never, would it have been better in the long run? I don't know. Like, would there have ever been a proper time to work up to that? I don't know. The thing is, it's too late now. Reddington can't go back in time. Maybe now, knowing what he knows, would he have told her the truth sooner? Maybe. Would he have told her the truth at all? Who knows? About who Reddington really is and their connection and their history. Like, I don't know. Because despite everything, the time Reddington spit with Liz was so important. So it's like, why would I threaten what we've had together? Yes, it had its complications. It had its ups and downs. But I had that time with her. Does it make up for the years I was missing? No, but I always made sure to keep an eye on her. She was always on my mind. She was always there in my heart. So, I always made sure she was taken care of. And just for these past couple years, I've kept an eye on her, a lot closer of an eye. I always knew who she was to me. She never knew who I was to her. She had her speculations, but still. But I like that Mercedes tried to convince him to go home. It's like, no, like, do not stay here. She's like, if you basically giving him an ultimatum, you can come home with me or you can open that envelope, but you can't have both. Like, someone else could, but for Reddington, it's not possible to have both because, it's just not, because once you get open that, it's going to become all consuming and it's never going to be over. This was supposed to be over before. And he's like, but you know what Liz meant to me. And it's like, she's like, I get it, but it's about moving forward, not being basically stuck in the past. And I'm not telling you to forget her. I'm just telling you to let go of your anger. And for him, he just can't, it's different, man. It's your child, having your child ripped away from you when you had everything saved up for her to have the keys to the kingdom. Everything you've ever done, every action you've made, every good, every bad, every decision you've ever made, everything you've ever done has been for her sake. And that person that you love and you care about most in this world, to have them ripped from you like that, it's just, especially now knowing there was more to it, it stings and it's hard to let that anger go. He let it go because he thought like, man, it's over with. I killed the guy who killed Liz and she's gone and I have to let it go. But it's like, no, there's more to the story. And so, because he's like, you can stay. Like, what if I tell you I don't and you stay it and then I don't open it? But she's like, no, if I stay, you will still open it. So Weecha is staying behind, but Mercedes isn't. But it's just like, right, she doesn't want him to get killed in the process of chasing after his vengeance. But at the end of the day, he does open it. Because I love that moment when they were meeting with what's his name, Junior, earlier, and he was presenting Dembe as someone else. He was like, oh yeah, like we kind of had a falling out, like someone died and he kind of fell apart afterwards. I love that, like Dembe's kind of look at him because it's like, right, Reddington's the one who did. But the guy was like, oh, like Reddington gave him a baseball to kind of like ease some of the tensions between them. And it's like, oh yeah, it's about, the whole conversation was like a metaphor for like forgiving someone. And he's like, oh, maybe you guys will fix it. And Reddington's like, maybe not, because he doesn't know if he will ever be able to forgive Dembe for this, because this is something else. Because it's different from like the whole Mr. Kaplan situation of, oh yeah, like Kate helped her, Liz fake her death and everything. So it's and obviously we know how that all played out with him trying to kill. Well, at the time he thought he was successfully killed Kate, but she came back with a vengeance. So now it's like Dembe's kind of on that other foot, which is interesting because at the time he thought it was Dembe that was betraying him when in actuality it was Kate, because he didn't know she was still alive at the time. But now it's like the shoe's on the other foot, and he presents it to Dembe, the information from the, turns out Home Dude found, because he followed, somehow he was able to track down Dembe, who was meeting with Elizabeth. It's like, right, here's you. He's like, putting the timestamp, you basically met with Liz an hour after I gave you that letter, which I'm like, it took you a whole hour to betray me, and it's like, what happened is your fault, because the man that you knew was 20 feet away from you, and you didn't even know it. You didn't even know. Like, you know who this guy is. You've seen his face. You knew to be on the lookout for him, and you didn't see him. You, who's always had this great sense of awareness of what's going on around you. You've done your job spectacularly for years, and when the time came, when it mattered the most, you failed her. Like, it's like, not only did Liz die because she hesitated to kill me when the time came because you told her the truth, but also you slipped up and you weren't on top of your game. He was like, you were so focused on telling Liz the truth, having peace with making that choice for yourself. It wasn't your choice. It was my story to tell, not for you to tell it when you felt like it. But it's like, right, Liz, when you're doing all this, you have to go into this knowing everything. It's like, no. This was my story. We've always disagreed about how I handle this, but at the end of the day, once again, that's my daughter, not yours. You should have never done that. Like, it's not like, I mean, I doubt Reddington gives him parenting advice, but I think that's also, let's not forget, Dembe is a father himself, so I'm sure that played a role in some of those decision makings. But even in that moment, he feels it, because he's like, right, he's like, there are many things that led to Elizabeth's death, and he's like, but at the end of the day, I am one of them. Like, I wasn't on top of my game. I slipped up. Because it was like, how did that guy know where we were? Because he took this photo and he kept track of you. You were so busy with this and that because of what this meant for Reddington. You were so, which understandably, he knew this is like the end result of, like, he knew what this meant to Liz. He knew what this would be Raymond's end. And so he was so distracted with all this other stuff, he didn't see this coming. He should have, because he always, in the past, he would have, but he was so caught off guard in this moment. And even Witcher kind of feels bad, because especially knowing the history that Dembe and Reddington have, because, like, Dembe's like a son to Reddington, and it's like, now for their relationship to be what it is, because even Reddington's probably not sure if he could ever forgive Dembe for it. And, Witcher's like, so he's like asking, like basically, do you think Marcia would come back? It's like, yeah, if your investigation over about Liz's death. And he was like, it's only just beginning. I'm like, interesting. Where else are we going with this? Like, I guess, like, first and foremost, it's like, you got to find out, how would he know to come look for Dembe and Liz? Like, how do he know where they'd be in the first place? I'm sure it's kind of like the thing of, like, there's definitely more to the story of, like, how were you able to find her in the first place? Because tracking them down in the first place is what, like, because he's like, right, the only people who knew where we were going to meet there was me, Liz, and you. So he fought, like, he kept an eye on Dembe and followed him to the restaurant. That's how he knew what was going down. But it's like, how did he get on Dembe's trail in the first place? I'm assuming that's what Reddington's going, he's not going to stop until he gets everyone connected to Liz's death who had any part to play in it. Because it's also, like, the problem of, like, yeah, like, I'm still, like, he has to point his anger at someone else, because the people directly responsible are all dead already. So he has to deal with everyone, because, the thing is, like, he's always going to be searching for someone else. But it's also like, right, there's a lot of self-loathing in that too, because it's like, right, I'm the reason why she was there in the first place. And maybe if I told her the truth sooner, who knows how this would have played out, would it have played out the same? There's just so many different factors at play here, so it complicates things. And so it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this continued investigation goes. I am curious, will Cooper end up turning to Reddington? It's like, well, having a criminal on your side, I mean, he's there, but, well, because it's also Reddington's helped him out other times, and I guess Cooper wants to figure this out on his own, because he's not bringing the rest of the team in, because it's going to compromise them a bit. It's like, right, I wasn't responsible for this thing, but I have kind of gone through the steps to kind of lie and cover my tracks a little bit. So Reddington's not going to judge you to actually help you, but maybe that's even more reason why you're like, I'm not going to tell Reddington. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.